As I was coming here today, my friend and I ended up sitting jam-packed in a bus full of about 90 people, I think. And we ended up sitting next to these two girls who were about in year 7, I think. They're right here. And they asked me and my friend what we wanted to be when we grow up. And I simply told her I didn't know. And I could see the judgment in her eyes when I told her that. So I instead asked her what she wanted to be when she was bigger. And the both of them told me in unison they wanted to study medicine. They wanted to be doctors. So, unfortunately, I couldn't ask them why they wanted to become doctors. So instead, I'm asking all of you. Why doctors? Why engineers? Why lawyers? So let me begin like this. Every once in a while, when we're given free periods in school, when we're blessed with them, let's say, but not too blessed because the price of good fortune just so happens to be a relief teacher and cover work. Almost every time, I hear my friends giving each other my favorite anti-procrastinatory, we need to get this work done today talk. We cannot let this work pile up. And before you know it, they're all grabbing their blue pens and calculators with like blank sheets of paper under their noses before someone in the backdrop of this delicate moment of discipline yells out, "Are you dumb? It's a free period. Why on earth are you writing?" And then it hits them, like a miracle to a follower of faith, let's say. So they push their sheets away, everyone now assembling their chairs around one common table, almost as if they were on a bonfire. And each one from my little class would engage in this gathering, like lost communities of men and women, engaging around the fire. And let me tell you, I really miss these moments. I really miss watching them, hearing what they had to say, from every joke to every deep discussion. Those were days I didn't need more than 3 alarms to wake me up every morning. The days I actually wanted to go to school, just so I could take my chair and assemble it around our delusionary bonfire. Because now, we don't tell each other stories, neither do we engage in the art of storytelling ourselves. Our lives around the fire are now forgotten. Forgotten in what is now the 4 most important years of our lives. So what happens to our little tribe of men and women during the course of the next 4 years? Well, they'll be deciding on what they'll be committing themselves to for the rest of their lives. A life that would put food and water on the table, but so much more than that. Their thresholds for success, their joys. And all these factors contribute to a single decision of selecting 4 subjects that will be the crux of our possible futures at 16, and a single major that will be for the rest of our lives at 18. And during this immense transition from sitting in a classroom to sitting in that frustrating exam hall, we tend to forget how much is actually expected of us to know exactly what we're going to do with our lives. Because the less frustrating that exam hall becomes to you and I, the more we're reminded of this need to pick a life of guaranteed success. And this is where I object. So to explain this, let me draw you in a metaphor from a book written by Michael J. Sandel. There is absolutely no difference between you and I as students and a free market economy during emergencies. Let me explain this. Just as consumers are faced with the injustice of paying inflated prices for a gallon of gas during times of economic emergencies, our final choices aren't really our choices now, are they? Because when this demand is derived from a free and less circumstance, leading to price inflation, to the extent where locals can no longer afford their basic goods and services, and This demand is freedomless. So how much of a free market is it when consumers are faced with price levels that are fixated upon a demand that is derived from freedomless circumstance? Just as how I question, how much of a free choice do you and I as students have over our own futures when we live and breathe in this culture of classical conditioning and negative reinforcement from anything other than a future that would guarantee us this success? I object on the grounds that South Asian societies as a whole have this contagiously tunneled vision of what the path to success looks like. An outdated and pre-established one, if I might add. And a vision that resides only in the 3 golden boxes of studying engineering, medicine, or law. Now, before I move on with my speech, I'd like to make it clear that in no way is the intent of my speech to deface the reputation of these 3 majors. Because honestly, how can I? Years of respect and approbation would prevent me from doing so, even if I really wanted to. So I hope you all will follow me as I attempt to remember my speech and word them out in phrases. I can't memorize speeches, or just huge blocks of information in general, which explains this. But for a small girl in an extremely oversized coat, something I can do is remember and tell stories. And hopefully this one sticks with you. In the early ages of man, when work was split between the hunters and the gatherers, it was a civilization that survived off the men that hunt and the women that gathered fruit and firewood. And because of this, all other forms of work were considered miscellaneous, which is a fancy way of saying no one really gave a damn. Because why should they? They just needed to survive. Then, many years later, came the revolutions, ranging from disputes among classes in society, to wars over racial intolerance, to the mechanization of work, also known as the Industrial Revolution. A revolution which birthed society as we know it. And our 3 golden boxes were also manufactured in this time of life. A time of life which needed them the most. And in this booming empire of machinery and manual work, the creators of these pieces of metal wired together, powered by electricity, were gods. They revolutionized life as we know it. And in the midst of this euphoric empire came the disease, the sick men, a falling employment rate, a falling GDP, a fall from greatness as they knew it. And then came the men in the white coats and stethoscopes to save the day, to cure the falling GDP of its sickness. And with all this came the creation of a formalized economy, now an economy with much at stake. So, lawyers and policymakers somehow made their way through this to become the backbones of these economies. Needless to say, there were reasons why these 3 majors were so important. But here's the thing. This wasn't our story. We don't live in the primitive ages for an absolute division to exist to guarantee us survival. We don't need to survive anymore. You and I are given classics, literature, books on evolutionary biology, computer science, philosophy, you name it. We just don't have to survive anymore. However, we live and breathe in this culture of ignorance and indifference, and a culture that keeps telling us that we have to survive, that we have to hunt and gather. Because when we keep breathing in this culture of indifference, we suffocate. We suffocate because we're forced to place ourselves into this vacuum that would, by establishment, guarantee us nothing but the success. So, a table published by the Monash University of Law provides statistics for anxiety, stress, and depression amongst medical and law majors as opposed to other majors. The result was an average of 2.8 from a scale from 1 to 5 of kids who considered themselves to be stressed or depressed. Now, this is a given. considering the amount of workload these majors have, considering the amount of work they have to put into, and a reality many students face, not just medical and law hopefuls. But when compared to an analysis of students, again, medical and law hopefuls, who took the option of intermission, which is when you take a break from your studies due to mental health concerns, the results were a staggering minimum of 0.61 and a maximum of 0.71. So in essence, these kids stay depressed. They keep suffocating. And for what? To shape themselves for a society that doesn't give us room to breathe? When we accept these standards, when we force ourselves into this misshapen mold of survival, we disregard any and all natural ability you and I possess. When our motivation isn't driven by passion, but instead driven by decades worth of research that somehow point towards this ideal of success and survival, it leads us to be dismissive of any and all harm this cause could bring out, whether it be health, mental health, or in general happiness. To those of you who are my age and know exactly what you'll be doing with your lives, I envy you. I really do. To the rest of you who feel like you're suffocating, I struggle with you. To those of you who are older than I am and have been through this, I applaud you. And to those of you who didn't select a path dictated to you by a survivor, by society, or by anyone, I wish I had known you. I wish I had known your story, because I would have listened to every single word without interruption. The fact is, I wouldn't be here on this red dot talking about what I'm talking about if I truly believed that my aspirations were being represented, because they aren't. All I've heard are the stories of individuals who force themselves into this mold for survival, or kids that never really took any risks because those risks don't guarantee them anything. You know what? Maybe there's someone out there. Maybe there's someone in here. And that someone is writing the story of a child who chose to do physics instead of engineering, or a woman who chose to specialize in genetic modification instead of becoming a pediatrician, or someone who chose to do, government and anthropology instead of doing law. And to the contradiction of many, didn't end up serving fries at McDonald's, because we've all heard that lame joke before. We struggle because we haven't heard the entirety of their stories. We struggle because we've never stopped to ask them why they chose to endure the impediments of this society, or even how they chose to endure the impediments of this society. Because when these false standards are shoved down our throats every living, breathing second, we make enough to survive, not to live. But when we choose to endure the impediments of this society, when we choose to make a life outside the comfort zone, when we have the courage to claim our curiosities, we don't just survive. The world is a very big place, rooted from the success stories of those who had the courage to claim their curiosities. And the best stories are the ones that leave you at the edge of your seat, fingers gripping into your skin. For as long as I can remember, I've taken the art of storytelling very seriously, whether it be around a delusionary bonfire with my friends, or on this stage with all of you. I know that from the lips of the storyteller, at least my lips, will tell the story of a girl. She didn't care enough to survive in this world, but she sure damn will live. Thank you so much.